Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We're going to be doing cocaine and alcohol on the programme today. Cocaine in the second hour, alcohol in the third. This judge, who is essentially, and I shall dig into the story a little deeper with you after 11, this judge has essentially let a cocaine user off on the grounds that he shouldn't be punished any more severely than Michael Gove has been for the same offence. And I suppose you could throw Boris Johnson into that particular mix as well, although he oddly seems to have escaped unscathed from his historical revelations about his own use. I've got a bit of inside information for you about that, which I just need to double-check, but I don't think it's been shared in the public arena before. After 12, that tale from Scotland about minimum pricing for alcohol apparently having an astonishing effect upon alcohol consumption. So it works, but is it fair? 10 is the time. We begin with a contemplation of last night's debate, which I have seen much of, but not all. I was very happy to attend the Private Eye Award, the Paul Foot Award last night. Congratulations to Emily Dugan of BuzzFeed for her astonishing work detailing the collapse of our justice system in this country at the moment. But it meant that I've got hold of the debate on catch-up. I tell you what, if you need anybody to herd cats for you anytime soon, Emily Maitlis certainly seems capable of doing a splendid job. I did not envy her at all, the format last night, but she did a magnificent job. Could have done with a little bit more space and time, I think, but that's the nature of the medium. Boris Johnson sort of channeled the millennial equivalent of Shaggy's It Wasn't Me. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the new It Wasn't Me is it was taken out of context. Everything's taken out of context. I might make a little list of things that have been taken out of context in recent years. Didn't J-Dog tell us that his economics guru's explanation that manufacturing and agriculture would collapse after a no-deal Brexit had been taken out of context, the context being a select committee in the actual House of Commons. Boris Johnson's comments about Muslim women being like letterboxes and bank robbers, I'm told, were taken out of context. We might have a look at how exactly that works. What was the context that somehow makes his comments less vile? I agree with Nick, for once. Completely about the absolute, I mean, really, really, really silly letting a bloke onto that debate, a Muslim imam apparently, whose social media account, the most cursory search, reveals of him to have indulged in that sort of anti-Semitism beloved of many of Jeremy Corbyn's most devoted fans. And we will have to mention Corbyn a bit today. I suspect he came out of last night's debates better than any of the people that were actually on the stage. But will he actually assemble a proper policy on the biggest issue of our time, or will he continue to fudge and fence it and enjoy the sight of his potential and putative opponents in any looming general election, sort of dividing their time between trying to bite chunks out of each other and continuing to deny reality? I don't know how to do this anymore, because you know Brexit has become something of a speciality of mine, and it's profoundly unsatisfying, because nothing ever seems to nudge. There's 4 of the potential future prime ministers still talking about things like Johnson talked about a transition arrangement in the event of a no deal. It's an utterance of such epic ignorance that even I'm beginning to wonder whether he actually understands the issue or is simply pretending not to understand in order to collate the votes of people who genuinely don't understand. I haven't seen the bit, but apparently he even mentioned Article 24 of GATT, a claim that has been so completely and roundly demolished that frankly you'd expect to get hauled over the coals in kindergarten if you gave that a run out as a valid answer to complicated questions. Ditto the British border in Ireland. Still they talk about it as if the technology needed to provide a frictionless border between 2 different regulatory frameworks actually exists. It doesn't. It doesn't exist. It might exist one day, but it doesn't currently exist. And you sort of sit here day after day describing reality. And then, I mean, even the fun of throwing open the phone lines to people still denying it is beginning to pale, isn't it? It's not funny anymore. And people sort of so immersed in wrongness and either miscomprehension or ignorance or delusion or all of the above. After a while, you realise there's so many of them, and indeed the polling of the Conservative Party members yesterday made chilling reading for anybody who actually cares about the United Kingdom, its economic health and its cohesion, both things that these people are apparently prepared to sacrifice upon the altar of their unicornist Brexit. You stare and stare and stare at this issue and can't quite understand how other people with absolute freedom to look at the same issues could have still found themselves labouring under such epic ignorance until you see Javid Hunt, Gove and Johnson on the actual telly box, punting the ignorance up another level. It's quite incredible. So I think for a couple more days, or a couple more debates. I don't know what happens in the next one, but we should probably continue to do a critique. I would warn you that one fella rang in after the last debate, and you have to have A, watched it, and you have to have B, listened to what I've said about it before you either critique what was on telly last night or critique what I have said about it. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Here it goes, pretty simply. People who understand what's going on still like Rory Stewart, but don't know how on earth he's going to get the withdrawal agreement that is the only available Brexit through Parliament. People who don't understand what's going on still like Boris Johnson and don't know how on earth he's going to get the United Kingdom out of the European Union with a Parliament that, thank God, at this point in history won't let him. Shall we just go home now? I mean, that's the end of the analysis. I know people have got programmes to fill and papers to put together, but that is it. If you understand what is going on, you will still like Rory Stewart, albeit that, I mean, just out of the five, albeit that Rory Stewart does not offer any hope for people who would rather remain in the European Union. He is 100% the compromise candidate. But he does understand what's going on. He does at least acknowledge the reality, the absence of any existing solution, for example, to the problem of the British border in Ireland. You also have this, I think, I'm just hearing that Johnson definitely did float the GATT Article 24 boat last night. Unbelievable, frankly. But I think the almost the strangest element of what Johnson apparently said last night, and all of this is, as I say, culled from clips, so feel free to fill in the gaps or flesh out my own ponderings. The most amazing thing he said last night was to talk about sorting things out, coming out with no deal, and then sorting things out during the transition period. Now, there is no transition period if we leave with no deal. The withdrawal agreement is, which he of course has voted for. Every sentence when you start doing this stuff is bonkers. He voted for it, right? Once or twice out of the three throws of the dice. The withdrawal agreement is currently the only available means by which we have any form of transition period, i.e. a period where we work out what's going to happen when we fully withdraw from the institutions of the European Union. This 2-year, or whatever it may be, window in which we sort out our trading arrangements, and we also, oddly, if I've understood Article 24 of GATT, I think that's the circumstance in which you could operate under those circumstances is when you have opened up negotiations for a full trade agreement, which both parties are keenly moving towards. But we don't need that because it's covered by the transition agreement, which also includes the backstop in Ireland. Are you still with me at the back? Are you still with me at the backstop? Because they're all talking twaddle about that as well, except Rory Stewart, who recognises the need for retention of customs union. What do I think will happen? Goodness knows. I don't know anymore. I haven't known for 6 months what will happen next. All I've known is that things will get worse before they get better. And at some point, reality will have to bite. But I don't know when that point will be. You've still got 4 out of 5 contenders to be our next Prime Minister, either willfully... what an astonishing choice this is. What do you think they're doing? Do you think they genuinely don't understand the issue? Or if you're a Brexiter, do you think they're just pretending not to understand the issue so that they can nick your vote off Nigel Farage, the sort of patron saint of deliberately seeking the support of people who don't understand things? That is a genuine metaphysical question. What are they doing, Javid, Johnson, Gove and Hunt, It's like the three farmers in The Fantastic Mr. Fox, isn't it? Javid, Johnson, Gove and Hunt. I won't do the second line because I'm drawn to iambic pentameters and easy rhymes. Javid, Johnson, Gove and Hunt. Pa-pum, 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 pum. Have a punt. I don't know. Are they pretending not to understand because they know that they need the votes of people who genuinely don't understand? Or do they actually not understand? I find it very hard to believe the latter. We can't have a foreign secretary, a home secretary, an ex-foreign secretary, and a secretary of state for the environment, a former education secretary. Surely they understand what's going on, but because we've let a liar like Farage into the political mainstream, they have to legislate for lies, which means they have to seek the votes of people who believe the lies, which means sunlit uplands, they need us more than we need them. The German car industry will gallop to our rescue, and of course the biggest lie of all, we can't control our borders. All of which leads us back to where we started. People who understand what's going on will still favour Rory Stewart over the other four candidates. People who don't understand what's going on will still favour Boris Johnson over the other four candidates. Give me a ring and say something about Sajid Javid, Jeremy Hunt or Michael Gove, 0345 6060 973, or dip your quill in your ink pot, metaphorically speaking, because I want you to speak to me, not write to me. And just share your views of what on earth is going on. I mean, they're frankly astonishing précis of the political landscape last night, with four people denying reality, one person acknowledging reality, but it's a reality that is still being furiously rejected by the people that will pick a winner out of those five. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. The whole Brexit edifice is built on lies and nonsense. So, given that it is the central platform of debate between potential future prime ministers, it's hardly surprising that last night's debate was, in many ways, shambolic in terms of content, slightly in terms of context as well. That's the end of my commentary. What's yours? Matchik is in Enfield. Matchik, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm a first-time caller. Thanks for taking my call. English isn't my first language, so, you know...
Don't worry, I have callers. English is their first language. You're already making more sense than them, so carry on.
The two questions I have. First one is, every single candidate from the Conservative Party is saying that the Irish border is not an issue because the border is not going to go up.
Is Stewart saying that?
Sorry?
Is Rory Stewart saying that?
Rory Stewart isn't saying that, but he's not going to win.
No, but you did say every single candidate. I mean, the only one that's likely to win is Johnson.
I was wrong. Yeah,
okay, carry on.
And if it's not an issue and nobody's going to put up a border, then why is the backstop a problem?
And there, in a nutshell, is probably the biggest hypocrisy at the heart of all Brexit rhetoric. It's really, really easy to fix the British border in Ireland, they say, but we categorically can't commit to keeping things as they are until we come up with that solution that's really, really easy. Thank God you're here, Matchik. There are mornings where I think that I'm the only one left pointing out the nudity of the Emperor from the crowd, isn't it?
And the other quick question I have is, you know, the poll about what the Tory membership would like to see instead of Brexit. So they are prepared for the economic destruction of the country, and they are prepared for the dismemberment of the country. So no more UK.
Yes.
But they are not going to countenance Jeremy Corbyn. So
correct.
I mean, what else can he do to this country? I mean, the country is going to be destroyed economically, so to speak, and they are okay with that. And it's not going to be UK anymore because they are okay with that as well.
Yes.
But they draw the line at Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, he's not going to start a war because he's a pacifist.
Yes, well, but I think I mean, as you know, I hold no particular torch for Jeremy Corbyn. Far from it, in fact. I think he's an absolute Herbert. But there's a new word for your vocabulary, Matchik.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Absolute Herbert. But I mean, the way it works is the people that Boris Johnson has offered a tax cut to, the people who earn just over double or just shy of double the national average income, many of whom are pensioners who are earning it off investments, not earnings. But he's already offered them a tax cut. Those people are terrified that Jeremy Corbyn might take some money off them. You see, so that's why the Conservative Party.
He offered me a double tax cut.
Who? Boris Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Win-win.
And it doesn't matter because he's already, went back on this claim, and it's not worth it if you make the pie smaller.
Yes, you see, you're doing this thing, Maciek, and I hope you don't feel I'm patronising you in any way, but you're bringing something called logic to your analysis of British politics, and that is why you're feeling so befuddled and confused this morning.
Yes, probably.
You're expecting a rational response to a series of logical premises, but Brexit waved goodbye to logic in June of 2016, when, you know, people made all sorts of outlandish claims, all of which have turned out to be false, but none of which they now admit they made prior to June of 2016.
Yeah, that's probably a very sad.
Well, of course it is, but it's oddly uplifting to hear the analysis from your perspective, because we all need to remind ourselves what reality looks like. Who do you think you're going to call a Herbert first? Who are you going to try out your new word on?
Probably Nigel Farage, if he lets me on. I've tried calling him and asking the same question, but he somehow doesn't allow me on the line. So, you know.
Well, that's what happens with logic and facts. You see, they run a flipping mile, my friend. Herbert's a bit mild, to be honest. 22 minutes, but then you do have to observe Ofcom regulations. 22 minutes after 10. If you know what's going on, then you'd have to favour Stewart, even though he offers nothing to people who recognise the madness of leaving the European Union. I think, to his credit, he is seeking to knit together a compromise. If you don't understand what's going on, or you're pretending not to understand what's going on, then you're still going to like Boris Johnson. Add to that analysis from last night. 23 minutes after 10 is the time. Dan is in Bury St Edmunds. Dan, what would you like to say?
Hi James.
Hello.
I watched the debate last night, and I've been following Rory Stewart quite closely through his campaign.
Yes.
I think what makes him stand out from the other candidates in this and more broadly the Tory party as a whole, is that he seems to be the only person that is effectively acknowledging that the referendum result was 48 versus 52, and
as opposed to the other four who are behaving as if it was 100-0.
Yes, exactly right. And I hear, some, hardcore Tory voters and hardcore leavers and they often refer to themselves as "we voted to leave," and that's what we should do.
But the problem is, and I'm not well, I am interrupting you, but I won't. I'll let you come back in a minute. Is that they are lying to themselves, because I've been doing this for 3 years, and I've been saying to people for 4 years, "What do you want? Why do you want Brexit?" And they said, "We want Brexit because we will get A, B, and C." And then people like me have sat there and said, "No, you won't." And they've said, "Yes, we will." And then it's turned out that A, B, and C are impossible. So they're now saying, "We never wanted A, B, and C. We've wanted this ludicrous kamikaze Brexit all along." So it's wrong to say that 52% of people voted for the ludicrous kamikaze Brexit, that these mad people are now punting. But you're right to say that Stewart is at least trying to do something that will delight nobody, because it will accommodate everybody to some degree.
No, but I think the thing that is interesting, which is why he's popular with the more Remainer side of the argument, he'll always be, people will always disapprove on the hardcore side of that argument, that, say, we must remain at all costs. And I would say I definitely fall more into that camp. But the interesting thing I find about him is that he's actually listening to everybody rather than an idealistic version of Brexit.
But he's saying to everybody, which is what makes him so fascinating politically. He's saying to everybody, you can't have everything you want. Whereas
and that's
recent politics,
don't like it.
Bingo. Because recent politics is kind of saying to people, you can have everything you can have unicorns, you can have sunlit uplands. Yeah. Boris Johnson actually said, of course, you can have your cake and eat it. The very distillation, the very definition of a delusional false promise. And yet he's leading in the polls. Stewart, who tells the truth, and on this issue, I know his voting record is profoundly questionable in many areas, but on this issue, he simply tells the truth, which is it's impossible to do anything that will keep you entirely happy. And that's what he's getting a kicking for from some quarters and a lot of praise from other quarters. Sadly, none of the praise seems to be coming from the quarter that he needs to seduce in order to win the ballot.
I think there's something that the Tory party membership need to perhaps take into account, is that all the other candidates are either Theresa May or worse. Some of them may have, a slightly more flowery personality to them. But realistically, the only one that can offer any alternative to the other four are Rory Stewart. And, all the others are just effectively just saying the same thing that Theresa May has said over and over again.
Stewart's closest to May in the sense of, without the nonsense about this being good or this being better than that or this being... Stewart is...
I agree with that,
There are only three paths. There are three paths. No deal, no Brexit, or the negotiated withdrawal agreement.
I do agree where he's closest to May is the fact that he's saying, it's basically this deal or nothing. But she had she was also unable to accept the reality of the situation, whereas at least he is trying to explain the reasons why we are not going to get there, and also listening to the other side of the argument, even if perhaps we don't like, what he's actually saying is the only option.
Nobody likes what he's saying fully. That's the point, because what he's saying is, no, but you have to remember those people over there who fundamentally disagree with you, and that is... I wonder if that sort of points the way forward even for consensus politics. Oddly, quite a lot of people have made this observation. I'm certainly not passing it off as my own. Oddly, this decision to leave the European Union has turned our political landscape into one that looks extremely European. 3-4 parties now, more or less, securing similar support. In the polling, it won't translate into seats because of the nature of our electoral system, but that's kind of the point. Our electoral system doesn't accommodate this sort of consensus or coalition politics. It might have to find a way to do so. 10:27 is the time. Let's go to Peterborough, which has, of course, been the focus of much attention in recent weeks due to that by-election. Darren is there. Darren, I'm a little short of time. What would you like to say?
Well, I just wanted to comment about last night's programme, really, and just say, look, none of the guys that came across as leaders to me last night. And what I want to say about that is that I did feel that Theresa May was a leader. She came across as
Holy moly, we've covered a lot of bases this morning.
and that's how I feel. And
really?
I think that, she went over to negotiate a deal, came back, and it was never going to go through because the people in the House of Commons, all of the MPs that were, kind of not really wanting to leave the European Union, would never have voted it through anyway. And actually, I honestly don't think it matters who would have been doing the negotiating in Europe. I actually don't think it would have been accepted. So
no, but you're doing the thing that Matchik did. Is it you're being evidence-based and logical? Do you not realise that if we'd sent someone else wearing different clothes, speaking in a different accent and with scruffier hair, they'd have treated us entirely differently in Brussels?
I don't think that's the case.
But you've got to believe more.
Well, maybe. But
believe in wigs. Believe in the bin.
Perhaps, but no, I honestly think that we need more of a leadership candidate, and I think...
But you don't think Stewart offers that?
Not really. They're not coming across like that.
And he does come across as quite odd as well. I don't say that in a I hope not in an insulting way, but he is quite. I know someone that went to school with him, and they said to me a few weeks ago, and I was saying, I like the look of Stewart. This lad who went to school with him said he's got a touch the John Redwoods about him, and I said, what on earth do you mean? And he goes, a bit otherworldly, not like in a sinister way, like many of us think Redwood is, but just in that slightly detached way, which I quite like, but I can't argue with that analysis. So that's why you don't see leadership. You see eccentricity and interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I did see leadership and passion and from Theresa May.
Well, I saw the opposite, but that's why I love phone-in radio, because you can have both of these positions. We'll let both of those flags go up the pole, Darren, and we shall see who salutes them, my friend.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. It's 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where it's really hard to argue. So don't argue. Just send me rude texts and tweets. That's the way to respond to the fact that you cannot refute the very simple observation that people who still don't understand anything or are pretending not to understand anything still favour Boris Johnson after last night's debate. People who do understand anything, whether it's in their first language or not, would still favour Rory Stewart. And none of them offer, really, any succour at all to the people who understand everything and realise that leaving would be stupid. This doesn't happen very often, but I glanced up from my... Come here a minute, I'm talking directly to you now, forget about all the others. I glanced up from my microphone and I saw a very excited Theo Osherwood hopping from foot to foot on the other side of the studio glass. So either every toilet in the building is occupied, or amazing scenes are unfolding in the world of politics. He's here now. Which is it, Theo?
Amazing scenes in the world of politics. The toilets here at LBC Towers are working perfectly well. Rory Stewart, rank outsider, has just confirmed this morning that he is in talks with Michael Gove to form a joint ticket to take on Boris Johnson in a vote of the Conservative Party membership. This is what he told the BBC's Victoria Derbyshire.
Talking about combining forces, because it's clear that Boris is going into the last round, and the question is, who is best placed to sit on a stage with Boris Johnson, and who's best placed to ask the testing questions that needs to be asked, and who has the vision of Britain that's going to excite people, get young people involved again in politics, and show us that we can build a much better country. I mean,
because let me pause you. It's interesting that you are talking to Michael Gove, because he says he's going to get a new deal. And you have said that is impossible. How could you conceivably join together with Michael Gove?
By sitting down and thrashing through that very issue, Victoria. So you've put your finger on the nub of it. We would have to sit down and come to a common position on that. And I would have to say to him, how is it that you think you're going to get a different deal through Brussels? How would you get a no deal through Parliament? And we'd have to agree to compromise. And if neither of us were prepared to budge on our analysis of the situation, then of course we couldn't combine as a team.
Listen, I know, always looking at me, he's in full Tigger mode today. It's not quite as exciting as your little...
It is.
As your hot shoe shuffle a few moments. Is it?
It is.
I don't think these talks will...
It is.
Okay.
It is because...
Theo Ashwood yesterday predicted that Sajid Javid would be ejected from the Conservative leadership campaign.
33, I was out by one.
Mate.
I was out by one. I was out by one.
I don't think they're going to come to an... Do you think they're going to come to an agreement?
If it means stopping Boris Johnson because they know that Jeremy Hunt isn't capable of doing it, and they come to an agreement. These are the two candidates...
Momentum back to Usherwood.
These are the two candidates that Team Boris are absolutely petrified of, because they're unpredictable. They will do anything to stop Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister. They do not argue within the same confines, within the same parameters as Sajid Javid or Jeremy Hunt. And Boris Johnson knows, and his team know, that if it goes the full 5 weeks, Michael Gove and Rory Stewart, one would be Prime Minister, one would assume, and the other would be Chancellor, then they will push Boris Johnson to the very, very limit.
Now, this is... I know that you're a big subscriber to this school of thought. This is based on the idea that with some... This is why Johnson's team want Hunt up against him, because he won't push Boris Johnson into a blow-up, as I think you like to call it. And Gove and or Stewart might.
Yes.
But they're genuinely fearful. So for them, it's not a 10 to 15% chance. It's a very strong chance that with a proper opponent who asks him questions, whether or not they ask him the big one, how many children have you got and how many times have you gone to court to try to keep their existence secret, or whether they go in on how the hell are you going to deliver this unicorn that you promise? And by the way, it's impossible to have your cake and eat it. That's the whole point of the proverb. Then he might come such a cropper that his candidacy is over before it even goes to the ballot.
But it's not just about...
I very rarely doubt you. But I don't see... But
that's the only... That's all they've got, James.
But the membership will forgive him anything. We know that. He's got an actual love child running around Chelsea.
But he has to be able to command the support of a cabinet. He has to be able to command the support of the House of Commons.
Not to get into Downing Street, he doesn't, which is all he cares about.
Well, he does, because he would have to form a government afterwards. And if senior members...
He could form a government. He could put any old dope in it, like Mark Francois.
But that's why Andrea Leadsom dropped out.
Yes.
If you remember, that was why Andrea Leadsom dropped out, because
No, Andrea Leadsom dropped out because she didn't feel she could win with the membership after her ludicrous comments about being a mother.
But she would have... I mean, there was a school of thought which I subscribed to, that had that vote been put in front of the membership, she would have won. The reason she dropped out back in 2016, and I remember speaking to you from Cowley Street when she came out and made that announcement, was that it was seen as just untenable that you could have somebody in Downing Street who would make such comments against their political opponent. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be on the. And when we're talking about the rivalry that we'll see if this manifests itself into a joint ticket against Boris Johnson, we're not just talking about on the record comments. We're talking about background briefings. We're talking about revelations.
And you, for the record, anyone new to this programme, Theo knows a lot more than I do about these machinations and ministrations. But here's the thing you don't hear me say on the programme very often. I was talking to a Conservative MP last night, and she... Yeah, I see. Keeping my sources secret there. She said to me, not only had they supported Boris Johnson in yesterday's ballot, but they were prepared to countenance no deal, despite having voted Remain, because it was the only way that she could see the party holding itself together.
And that's a realistic assessment.
Yes.
The only way we leave on October the 31st, realistically, is that a Prime Minister comes back after the summer recess and calls a snap election, which takes place in the first couple of weeks of October, having secured a much larger mandate, either by doing a deal with Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party.
They'd have to.
They'd have to secure a larger mandate. They'd have to secure a majority because...
No, but they'd have to do a deal with Farage because that's the whole point. The whole threat to the Tories is the number of people that believe his lies. And their votes count for exactly the same as people who understand stuff.
Absolutely. So they'd have to do a deal with Farage, in all likelihood. Yeah, I mean, there's no getting around it. And then we would have a no-deal Brexit on October the 31st.
If they win. I mean, there's no guarantee they'd win. Because if Jeremy Corbyn got his finger out of his fundament and the Liberal Democrats joined forces, then it would be a de facto second referendum. So why wouldn't Prime Minister Johnson call a referendum as opposed to a... Because looking at him and being a student of his calumnies and moral corruption over the years, I would predict Johnson getting in by hook or by crook, having made all manner of different promises in private to all manner of different people. Once he gets in, he says, "Well, I've had a look at the facts now, and I don't think we can press on down any course without a mandate from the British people." And then he goes back to a referendum and stays as Prime Minister. And such is his dissembling two-facedness, whatever the result of the referendum is, he could then claim to be the Prime Minister to act on it.
But a referendum is tied in implicitly with the narrative of stopping Brexit.
Yes, you've watched Boris Johnson for almost as long as I have.
But he
could easily set himself up as the man who will stop Brexit if he thinks it will keep him in Downing Street for longer.
No, he wouldn't do that.
Well, you think you might see some consistency, honesty?
The moment Theresa May went was when she said she would legislate. When she went in the middle of last month, she did her final push, and that was she said she would legislate for a second referendum, and that was it. She was gone within 3 days.
Correct.
Gone.
Correct. But a week is a long time in politics. Final question. Would we expect this Stuart Gove ticket to be properly announced? Well, it has to be properly announced or not announced before this evening's vote.
Well, if you look at the numbers this evening, or from yesterday, they've got a little bit of time to thrash out that deal because there's Sajid Javid, who got 33 votes, who I predicted would not make it through to the next round, as you pointed out.
But he did.
Well, I got it out by... I was out by one.
Yeah.
So he will go... We're past double elimination, so Sajid Javid will go tonight, and then we would expect something to be announced before lunchtime tomorrow, which is when that moment would have to come where either one of them goes out or they announce a joint ticket. But importantly for Rory Stewart... and for whoever is going to drop out, they have to be able to guarantee that their supporters would go over to the other candidate. So it's worthless, isn't it? If Rory Stewart says, OK, I'm going to support Michael Gove, I'm going to be Michael Gove's Chancellor, or vice versa, and then they can't carry that cohort of MPs, 37 in Rory Stewart's case, over to the Michael Gove campaign.
Got it.
Yep.
All good. We're going to see you again?
PMQs.
PMQs today. Does anyone care?
We should care.
I know we should care. This is Brexit Britain.
I'll make it good.
Well, you always make it good.
I'll make
a lot
it
of love coming in for you at the moment on socials. Have you noticed? Does it reach
There was somebody who posted a very nice tweet.
Not just somebody. A lot of love coming in for you, and obviously the challenge you have dealing with my absurd, puerile sense of humour and.
I see it as that. It's a challenge. It's one I wreck.
Telling me. Speaking of challenges, I smell a small rodent when this imam who asked a question about Islamophobia last night, turned out to have pretty virulent anti-Semitism all over his social media account. Now, because I'm cursed with a desire for facts and evidence, I didn't leap to the conclusion that the BBC had been remiss. I did, however, concur that this was a very bad look. And, of course, it turns out, once you look at the facts and evidence, that they did do due diligence and proper scrutiny, but the man had deleted temporarily the public Twitter account upon which this anti-Semitism has appeared. So, very, very simply, the background research into the online and social media profiles of the questioners on last night's debate was conducted, but if one of them has deactivated the account upon which embarrassing evidence has appeared, there is nothing you can do about it. Their statement goes on, following the debate, one individual reactivated a public Twitter account he had previously deactivated, whose tweets were not visible during our research period. Had we been aware of the views he expressed there, he would not have been selected. So once again, the British media offers you a choice. Would you like to be angry, or would you like to be informed? If it's informed that you prefer, stick with me. Now, a politician yesterday said to a member of the public to whom I have introduced you, that he was going to sign his death warrant. And it shouldn't be controversial, because it was clearly a joke. Just as when Joe Brand joked about replacing milkshakes with battery acid on a comedy programme, and indeed inserted the additional comment that this is a fantasy, that shouldn't have been controversial either. So something that slightly confuses me this morning is that all of the people who pretended to be outraged by Joe Brand, including, of course, Mr. Farage, who has made jokes about dead people, dead gay people. He's made homophobic jokes at his own brother's wedding about a dead man in Michael Barrymore's swimming pool. He called for the police to get involved in the investigation of Joe Brand's joke. You could, I suppose, be slightly more obviously hypocritical, but you'd have to tattoo hypocrite across your forehead to be more hypocritical than that. But Mark Francois, a man who, 6 months ago we'd blessedly never heard of. You know, if only there'd been more work for Don Estelle tribute acts, then Mark Francois might never have gone into politics. You remember Don Estelle, don't you, from It Ain't Half Hot, Mum? The little tubby fella in the hat. Did he do Whispering Grass? Didn't he have a hit record at one point as well? If only there'd been more work for either Penfold sort of party attenders, you know, children have a party and people turn up in fancy dress like Batman and Robin or something like that. If only there'd been more demand for Danger Mouse and Penfold, where Penfold didn't need a costume, then Mark Francois could have gone in and cleaned up on that. Or if he'd been born in a slightly different era, during the heyday of It Ain't Half Hot, Mum, and he could have joined forces with a Windsor Davis lookalike, and Mark Francois could have cleaned up as the country's leading Don Estelle tribute act. But sadly he didn't. So now he's doing stuff like this.
All right. Do you know what? Well, Steve, in the nicest possible way, we're signing your death warrant. Are you? On the 31st of October, boy, you're out of a job.
Is that a threat?
It's not a job. It's a passion. Saving our nation. I'm sure you can find something else productive to do.
Nation before party.
So, Steve Bray there, the man who heckles and questions mercilessly and tirelessly a whole range of politicians outside Parliament and various other Westminster institutions. And I don't know whether Steve will be a little bit cross with me, but I'm not going to get offended on his behalf today, because Francois prefaced his comments within the nicest possible way and clearly was not suggesting that anybody should kill Steve Bray or indeed hasten the signing of his death warrant. Just as Joe Brand was not suggesting that anybody should throw battery acid at far-right politicians or campaigners in this country. And I just do think somebody has to keep pointing out these double standards employed by clowns like Farage, because, of course, he continues to influence the political landscape in quite a profound way. Significant numbers, significant swathes of the population are still basing their attitude to Brexit on lies and misunderstandings, which is why last night's debates were such a mess, because 4 men on that stage were still denying reality. And they have to deny reality because your man is clowning around the country, selling a delusion, selling nonsense, selling snake oil, and their party now has been crippled by the number of its members that have swallowed the snake oil. You can't become leader of the Conservative Party, as things stand, without being complicit in that snake oil sale, in that delusion. And the only one who's refusing to be complicit in it and is actually acknowledging the reality is Rory Stewart, who, of course, is acknowledging a reality that every other man on that stage last night denies, and, which more importantly, the Conservative Party membership furiously reject, because they're now absolutely certain that when they voted to leave the European Union, they were voting to split up the Union, to wave goodbye to Northern Ireland and to inflict significant damage on the UK economy. Of course they did. 10:54 is the time. Back to Croydon. Gabriel is there. Gabriel, give me your analysis.
All right, thanks for taking the call. My analysis is we're all asking the wrong questions. We've all been misdirected. We're looking all in the right direction. The only person who sees the right direction is Nigel Farage. And not praising him, but we should all learn from his tactics, which is Rory's not going to be the next Prime Minister. That will be Boris. He's positioning himself for 3 years from now. We need to be ready for that. What is the opposition doing? What is Labour doing? What are the Lib Dems doing?
Yeah, I'm just going to pause you there. We are analysing last night's debate. I appreciate you might have wanted to see something different, but you didn't. So let's rewind and start again and tell me what you made of last night's debate. And let's confine our conversation in the first instance to people what was actually in it.
I only got clips of it. I didn't watch
Me too.
the full
I can't
thing.
have a crack at you, although I did say what we'll be doing today is relying on people who watched all of it, because I only saw the clips.
Right.
So your analysis that it was rubbish is based on not having watched it.
Well, pretty much.
Yeah, fair enough. It's 2019, it's Brexit Britain, mate. You fill your boots. You don't have to have seen it to have a strong opinion.
That's true. But I did catch clips of Rory, and I think, like you said, he's the logic candidate. And he's bringing a lot of logic to the situation. He's not making promises that are unfulfillable, and that's enviable. I understand why the other candidates are taking the positions they have to take. If you are going to be the next Tory Prime Minister,
you have to deny reality. You have to win the votes of people that have believed Farage's lies.
Exactly. So you get those votes first, and then you figure the rest out. It's sad, but that is what it's come to. So Rory's not going to be Prime Minister. He will push him down the line. He will position himself for a situation in which
we'll see. This Gove hookup, Theo's more excited about it than I am, but it could potentially be a massive game changer. What would you like to see Corbyn doing in the meantime, Gabriel?
I would like him to take a position and say Labour now stands for a second referendum.
Now, there were rumours this morning he was about to. I think it was on the front of the Times. And do you know, I come in on the tube now, so I can't have conversations with anybody like I used to when I got driven into work. But the conversation I would have had would have been, I believe it when I see it. And I suspect, if it hasn't already happened, that will turn out to be yet another fence-sitting mirage. Tom Watson, of course, has been pretty explicit in calling for what he, as deputy leader, thinks the party will do. But at some point, Corbyn's going to have to offer the opposite of what the Tories are offering, isn't he?
Well, this is the thing with populism. People either support an idea, or they support a candidate who they believe represents an idea. Corbyn and Momentum represent all of these beautiful things, and so people will vote for Corbyn. It doesn't matter what Tom Watson is doing. He's not the one.
We've got the last three big ballots nationally do rather give the lie to your theory. He lost the general election. He lost the council elections, or lost a hell of a lot of support. He took a massive kicking in Peterborough, even though the candidate got over the line, although some questions remain over the probity of that particular ballot.
And who are you talking about, Corbyn?
Yeah. People aren't voting for him in anything like the numbers he needs for your analysis to float. Quite the opposite. He's hemorrhaging support, left, right and centre.
I'll hold off on the support. I think there's a very coordinated attack to downplay Jeremy Corbyn's influence, but that's a side note.
No, there isn't. I tell you, do you know Jeremy Corbyn's biggest problem is?
Go on.
Jeremy Corbyn. It's 10:58. You're listening to Jeremy Corbyn. Oh, no, you're not. You've never heard Jeremy Corbyn on this programme. And I'm one of the country's leading lefties, according to right-wing people. So why the hell wouldn't he come on here? Riddle me that. James is in Manchester. Hello, James.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Mustn't grumble. What's occurring?
So this is calling about the observation of last night, and I was unlucky enough to watch it last night, all of it.
You can't all get invited to the Paul Foot Awards.
It was just kind of a bit of the body language And it just felt like, like a high school debate team and organised the prom.
Hang on a minute. I was in my, not high school, my public school debate team, and we were a lot groovier than these clowns. I can tell you that.
That's good. But did you get the prom done?
You've lost me now. I don't know what you're talking about.
So
but anyway, I know what you mean. It was a pedestrian performance. It seemed pedestrian production.
It was really bad organised. Badly organised. And they were just shouting over each other, and you kind of had Boris, who looked like a naughty school kid, eyes down, didn't really want to answer anything.
But that's his tactic. He's like Corbyn. I mean, he tries to stay away from questioning as much as possible because his closest aides have quite rightly pointed out that the only thing that can happen if he exposes himself to proper questioning will be bad. Corbyn, Johnson, identical models, identical advice from their aides, albeit at different ends of the political spectrum.
It was textbook from Boris, basically. And then you got Gove, who looked, wide-eyed, staring at the camera, not saying he was on anything, but, look.
Well, of course he wasn't on anything. I'm late for the news, or I was about to be, so I'm not going to let you crash me through the news with your absurd attempt to inject some humour into Michael Gove's drugs confessions. Speaking of Michael Gove's drug confessions, have you heard about the judge that just let a cocaine user off because he said you shouldn't be more punished than Michael Gove was? No, you haven't. You will after this. A little bit more on this, I think, on last night's events, because the picture will change again tonight. Another candidate will quit the fray, and I wonder who you think it's going to be. If these talks between Michael Gove and Rory Stewart prove fruitful, then as Theo Usherwood just explained during the the news bulletin, it could change everything. I do think, and I could be wrong on this, but I do think there's a touch of the Trumps about Johnson's fans. So that famous line, that infamous line of Donald Trump, back when some of us thought that actually being despicable and depraved would be an obstacle to achieving the highest office in the land. I think it was even before he admitted to being a sex offender on that secretly recorded tape, which again didn't upset his base at all, because they're quite comfortable with sex offending as long as it's being done by someone they like. That line about Fifth Avenue, you could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. I don't know. I know Theo's theory hinges upon how the parliamentary party would react to Johnson exceeding even his own record of dishonesty and immorality. But I don't know. You're looking at a Conservative Party membership now that is pretending that Brexit meant leaving the union with Scotland, leaving the union with Northern Ireland, and inflicting significant economic damage on the country. Or at least perhaps that's unfair. They're not pretending that that's what Brexit meant. They're saying that is what Brexit now means. And if you're going to sit there and say that 17.4 million people voted for that in June of 2016, then you're doing that thing that Dostoevsky warned you about. You're lying to yourself, not just to the rest of us. And as soon as you start lying to yourself, you lose the ability to love. And when you look at the kind of people who are drawn to Boris Johnson, or indeed Donald Trump, it's very hard to escape the conclusion that he has weaponised self-hatred, weaponised an inability to love not just others, but oneself. Here endeth the lesson. Back to the analysis of last night's so-called debate. Tom's in Harrow. Tom, what did you make of it all?
Hello, James. I've watched the debate last night with my fiance. I'm a member of the Conservative Party. I'm 29 and I'm...
Stop the front... Hold the front page. The man's got to vote. The man's got to vote. We've got a voter. We've got a live one. We've got a live one. Tom actually gets to help choose our next Prime Minister. Carry on, Tom. Over to you.
I don't know why there are more Conservative members calling in to you. Maybe they're not listening to the programme. But I think, I want to put in a good word for... Rory Stewart.
We had one yesterday. He called all the politicians dopeheads.
Some of them are, but that's besides the point, I think. I don't want to base it on whether they've smoked or whatever.
No.
But what I wanted to say was that Rory Stewart, I think, in both of the debates has come out not head and shoulders, but as a good candidate, and I think he deserves to go up against Boris for the leadership. And what Theo Usherwood said about about him maybe teaming up with Michael Gove,
yes,
I think that would be a really good ticket.
Do you want?
I quite liked Gove before when he was doing his ministerial posts, and I think he's done quite a good job there.
Okay.
And I think he may, I don't know if he deserves a crack at the top job, but I used to be very pro Boris Johnson, and I think the way he's handled himself in the campaign this time has been terrible.
He hasn't done
really
anything.
Terrible. I think exactly. And as you say, there's a lot of the commentators say as well that he's just keeping his head down. He's been told to keep his head down, but that's not what I don't think the country needs. We need someone to be leading the debate, not sitting in the background, looking at his hands the whole time, trying not to answer the questions.
Well, I don't want to fall out with you because we've only just met, but I mean, you must understand he can't answer the questions because his entire... This is where because you admired him up to this point. This is where we perhaps will part ways. He can't answer any of these questions because he's been telling lies for 3 years. You can't have your cake and eat it. There never were any sunlit uplands. They didn't need us more than we needed them. The German car industry isn't going to come to our rescue. The European Union isn't going to suddenly roll over when we threaten to blow our own brains out, metaphorically speaking, with a no-deal arrangement. He can't expose himself to scrutiny because scrutiny will reveal him for what we know him to be. It's only, with the greatest of love and affection, it's only people like you that have fallen for it, and there are enough people like you who haven't yet seen the light to get him over the line. So he can't do the scrutiny that you desire because then everybody would see him for what he is. And oddly,
I think
you've gone off him. You've gone off him.
I think anyone who watched... Sorry, Joe. I think anyone who watched the debate last night, and I'm just not sure whether the Conservative Party members do watch it or not. But I think anyone watching that debate last night would have had second thoughts about him. No. If you've got someone like Rory Stewart who's, all right, he was talked over and people were interrupting him, and he still managed to get a pretty good point across. All right, I don't agree with everything he said, but he's got something that's, what is Rory Stewart's thinking? And that's
you're thinking.
I want someone to be doing a bit more of that and a bit less.
But Boris Johnson's fans can't think.
Soundbite.
They can think. They're capable of thinking, but they can't allow themselves to think because if they genuinely start analysing and thinking what's happened over the last 3 years, they'll realise that they've been sold Tower Bridge by a spiv in Trafalgar Square. They can't do that. They have to carry on saying, Boris for me! Brexit means Brexit! Boris! Woo! Doff cap, tug, forelock, vote Johnson. If they stop to think, their whole world falls apart. And on that bombshell. Matt's in Hove. Matt, what would you like to say?
I'm a Conservative voter, first-time caller as well.
Are you a member?
I am a member,
Two for two. 2 for 2. Crikey, we can practically get our candidate over the line if we could all get on a bit better. Carry on, Matt. What do you want to say?
Frightfully boring,
yes.
The whole thing last night. I felt that it was poorly managed. The best person who played the best game was probably Boris Johnson because it was very much keep quiet and...
Polar opposite of what the last fella said, and you're both members. How funny. Funny as in interesting.
I know. Yeah, thank you. I thought Rory Stewart did all right. Jeremy Hunt's starting to get a little bit boring as well about Jeremy Hunt is starting to get a little bit boring. I mean, I think the news today about Michael Gove and Rory Stewart, I think that could be great. I think I do like Rory Stewart because I think you highlight it quite well about the realism factor.
Yes,
there is a vacuum of realism at the moment in that respect, and I think Michael Gove of all of those Brexiteer bunches, of which I'm not a member, is perhaps a bit more realistic. He voted for the deal before Boris Johnson. I think he doesn't want to go the full extreme. I've got more trust in him, which is very odd. If you asked me that question 2 years ago, I probably wouldn't say that.
Fair enough.
Than perhaps some of them.
No point having a mind if you never change it, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but I think Rory Stewart, I like the outsider element of him, but he just seems to be a bit more in touch, maybe. Than some of them, and I think the two of them together
It'd be amazing if it came down to two Etonians thrashing it out, wouldn't it? Albeit they're Etonians of different hues.
That does...
Tell you what it would do, though, Matt. It would be a boon for Brexit supporters, because it would really stick it to those metropolitan Liberal elites, wouldn't it? To have two metropolitan Liberal Etonians slugging it out.
I know. Those elites
Johnson.
are doing so badly at the moment, aren't
That'll
they?
teach them. Did you vote to leave the European Union?
I did not. No,
because you're the people that fascinate me the most. Because the Conservative Party has been so crippled by Brexit, you still feel loyal to it, even though, in many ways, no one on that stage represents you.
Yeah, for now. For now. I think there was before Theresa May went in, I was very much thinking, well, if it's going to be Boris or something like that, I might hold on and vote against him.
Right.
But then Theresa May got in, and I thought, do you know what? She's probably the most sensible decision at the time. I still think she was the most sensible decision at the time.
Yes, because, except that we've just spent 3 years in the fridge, haven't we?
Yeah.
And now we're going to have to take it out of the fridge, and that's when it will go off. So Theresa May just postponed.
She kicked the can.
The curdling of the country was postponed for 3 years by Theresa May.
Which is a shame. But I think now she's allowed the Francois and the Rees-Moggs to get too much momentum as well, which is a real shame. And
yes,
so I think I was quite of the Dominic Grieve perhaps variety or Nick Bowles or something like that. Quite keen on quite.
You know what's going to happen next if it hasn't happened already? The notion that whenever we say things can't get any madder than they have already is it expires. It's out of date by the time I finish the sentence. Presumably it's either already happened or is about to. Michael Gove, the co-chair of Vote Leave, will be portrayed as some sort of Brexit traitor, won't he?
Yeah, I mean, that's the new thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not Brexit enough.
Yeah. What does that mean? I'm not telling you what that means.
What is Brexit enough?
Yeah,
you know, and you're just not Nigel Farage, basically. That's apparently what they want. That's what people keep telling me, which I didn't know was on the. You know, as you keep saying, I didn't see that on the card.
No, I've argued for some time that once you allow lies into the public discourse unchallenged, and then when you use the liars to get your own political project promoted, not that Gove or Johnson thought that they would actually end up winning, but they got into bed with the liars, and now you can't extricate yourself from that. You can't, millions of people have believed these lies. And Farage's lies in particular have been believed because people like Johnson and Gove campaigned on the same side as him. So it detoxified him for a lot of voters. Some were perfectly comfortable with his toxicity before. You sort of that 15% rump that you see on the far right in most electorates. But Gove and Johnson detoxified him, and now they're reaping what they sowed. It's just a shame that the rest of us could get caught in the ensuing crossfire. It's coming up to 11:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Speaking of Michael Gove, I think we'll have a slight change of conversation now, although don't be surprised. In fact, I would put money on my colleagues continuing with some of this analysis later in the afternoon on LBC, by which point I'll be at Queen's watching the tennis, actually. Happy days.